Football Beyond Borders works with young people who are passionate about football, but struggling at school. We work with them to ensure that they go on to pass their GCSEs and make a successful transition to adulthood.
What was your first hire, and how important was that for your organization?
Wow, fascinating question. So, I mean, I guess our first hire was with the two of us. That's the first thing to say, right? Me and there was a crew of us at the start around, but there were two of us, or maybe three actually, who really committed to it and were like, we want to do this full time. So I think that's probably the first thing to say. It's really hard to do this on your own. You can do it on your own, but even if you're officially a founder, sole founder, doing it on your own, the question is going to be, who are those people who are going to be around you? Who are you going to love doing this with? So whatever, they may not come to work for you, but for us, there were three of us. We had a whole thing, which was, can we start to get up to doing it a day a week? So it was like, can we charge schools to charge £100 a day? So we'd go one more day up, right? So that was a big thing. It was three of us coming in together. So that was the first thing. Then that first hire is a mad moment, because you're thinking, wow, I really remember like 9 years ago, chatting to my mom and being like, I love doing this, but I don't think I could ever do this full time. And I don't think there's enough money for me to do this full time, right? It felt so far away when we just were starting it. We could just about get 100 quid a week from schools if we were lucky. Then we got to a point where we're like, oh, wow, we can actually hire someone full time now. But that's a crazy thing to do, because unless you know them already, they're essentially coming to work for an organization which is going to have, unless you've got money at the start, which we didn't. Our office was, imagine, it's this youth centre, which itself is a closed down derelict youth centre. And people would turn up and they'd be like, oh, thought these guys were a bit big in this, but I get it. It's a big space, it's a youth centre, they work with young people. And we'd be like, oh, sorry, we're not actually, the youth centre's not ours. We're renting a room from the youth centre. So we go through this like long corridor, all the wallpaper falling off. It was just a state. And we'd have a room which was like the size of your average downstairs toilet, right? Imagine it wasn't a toilet. We had a separate toilet, luckily enough, but it was. So that was then the next thing. And I think two things for that. Again, it goes back to friendship. The beauty of FBB, we don't talk about this a lot. We're called Football Beyond Borders. The reason we're called Football Beyond Borders is we started out, we all met, university football team. We did a load of international football tours. So each year we just took a football team to a conflict region. Weird to think about it now. That's what we did. We went to Syria and Lebanon. We went to Egypt and Palestine. We went to the Balkans. This idea that football could bring people together, right? It wasn't particularly impactful in terms of what we did. We kind of dropped in, played football, brought people together, or at least it's hard to know what the tangible impact of that was. But what that meant is there were a group of people who backed each other because we've been on these tours together. We ended up in Turkey, a bunch of 19-year-olds, no eastern part of Turkey, Kurdish part of Turkey, no real idea what we were doing. Ended up being completely co-opted by the Kurdish resistance party. We really had no idea what we were doing, and then got kicked out of Turkey. The police came to see us, and they were like, you guys went here. What was that about? And we were like, oh, we were just working with these people who were hosting us. Anyway, we had to flee Turkey into Syria. Wow. The reason I tell that story is because those shared experiences create a deep sense of bond and connection, and a sense of, from a group of 50, 60 people, wow, I trust these guys. I want to go through things with these guys. And so long answers. And we then had to make our first hires. We had people already who we knew and who trusted us, who we knew would add something to the business. So a guy called Joe Watford came in and had been on those tours with us. He was brilliant with young people, and he had a brilliant vision for our culture. So that's kind of the big first hire. We then had a guy called Jack Bad, who had known us from quite early days, who was just up for working long hours with young people and kind of felt like he was a part of that crew. So long way of saying, first hires, firstly, try and make it those who are really committed to the business from the start. Get your founders on board if you can. Secondly, get people on board who are going to add something to the business, but also have already got a deep sense of connection with what you're about.
Did you know from the beginning exactly what you want to do, or like did the organization evolve into what it is now? Because I know a lot of people, including like myself, start something, and sometimes you just don't know exactly where it's going to end up. So I would love to know those kind of
exactly
from the get-go.
and it's so funny telling this story in retrospect, right? Because it's people like coherency and a narrative. So I don't even normally talk about those tours because they're not coherent with the narrative now. We're known for working with 12 and 13-year-old girls and boys in secondary schools in London, Manchester, and the West Midlands. We do an end-of-year tour where we'll take them to Loughborough Uni for a football tournament. We're not going internationally, but it doesn't make sense as a story to talk about a load of international tours. So absolutely not. Hopefully the tours suggest my view from growing up was I grew up with a load of kids played football for the same team from age 8 to 16, and none of us made it to professional footballers, and a lot of them struggled at school. And it never really made sense to me why they struggled at school when they had the hard work, the discipline, the focus. My co-founder Jazz grew up in Kent, playing for Gillingham, very similar experiences. And so from the start, we were like, there must be something here about how football can help young people to do better. But it was totally incoherent, right? We began doing community-based youth work. Point at the road, about 100 yards up the road, Kennington Park, and working in schools. And a set of things happened, which meant that we were having more success. It was an easier way to work in schools. And so now we are only focused on working with schools. I guess the second thing that is really important to me as a leader and is important to the way we built FBB is this idea of putting learning at the heart of an organization. And it comes back to the question you're asking. FBB, this is probably about 2015, 2016, so it wasn't there right from the start, but we talk about having a driving question at our work, which is what does it take from most vulnerable young people to thrive in mainstream school? So I see my job beyond anything else as trying to answer that question. And that question is really important for 2 or 3 reasons. One, it's a question, right? I don't know the answer to it. So I'm just trying to get a little bit further along in answering that question. Secondly, it really centers the essence of our work, which is vulnerable young people. We quit our jobs to do this work. We thought it'd be voluntary, but a boy we worked with at the end of our first 6 months working with him said, "Are you guys coming back next year?" There was no funding model at the time. He's literally just doing it for a mate who was a teacher. And he said, "You guys are snakes. Like, you turn over my life, you make a bunch of promises, and then you leave," because we weren't sure whether we were coming back. And so Jazz and I had a chat at that time, which was like, cool, we're going to do this, we're going to quit our jobs and go in. It's got to be for young people like Jordan. He's a boy growing up in care. Boy, had lots of tricky experiences going on. We said, cool, so we'll do it, but it's got to be long term because 6 months wasn't enough for this boy. It's got to be focused on the most vulnerable young people. And so we've centered that from the start. Second reason why it's important is it does set the limit to the business. It's about mainstream school. So we don't work in alternative provision and PRUs. We don't do community-based work. People criticize us for that. You can argue you're trying to work with the most vulnerable young people. The most vulnerable young people probably aren't even in school, or they're in pupil referral units, or they're in secure units in prisons. So there's a kind of, and I guess the 2 things that I try and bring as a leader, one, that commitment to learning. So that question is really important. It means our model's always changing. And secondly, a kind of transparency and an honesty about what we are and what we aren't. We are hyper specialists at engaging young people in schools who no one else knows how to engage. But we're not brilliant at doing street-based youth work with kids who are out of school. We're not brilliant at working with people over the age of 21, right? We are specialists at working with those young people. So that is a long way of answering that. Yeah, our model has changed so much from when it began. The essence of it, vulnerable young people supported through football, hasn't changed because we have those principles, but it will also continue to change. So as an example, about 2 years ago, I was like, we did all this work, one-to-one therapeutic mentoring, classroom work, pitch work. And I was like, we're not really answering that question because these kids are still going into classrooms where teachers aren't supported or trained to support them. So we just end up in a situation. I just done a really good counselling session with the boy. He left my session. He was still quite fired up. He went into a maths lesson, quite like fired up, right, sat down at his desk. The teacher themselves, stressed out, not supported, reacted. What are you doing? Within 2 minutes, the boy was throwing a chair. Within an hour, he was on a 5-day suspension from school. Fine, fair enough, right? Through a chair, maybe that's the best thing to him. Who knows? But I was like, we're not going to answer this question unless we can start to provide better support for teachers and adults. So 2 years ago, we started to do a lot more work with teachers around their own training, the supervision and reflective practice support they get. I'm now thinking, well, teachers aren't even the people who spend the most time with these young people, it's their parents. So if we're genuinely trying to answer this question, we probably need to be thinking more about how we work with parents. So again, a long way of saying we're always going to be developing. While I'm the chief exec, we're going to be growing and developing because vulnerable young people are still struggling at school, right? But we're not going to drift from that focus on the most vulnerable. And I think that's probably the essence of it. Nail your principles early on, and your purpose. Be completely flexible about the means, and that's why I often say people focus so much on the means, particularly in the sports space. They're like, I want to do something with football. Do you see what I mean? And like, I do something with football, that's your passion. And that might be the right thing for a business, for a charity, right? The thing for a charity to get right is, who are we going to support? Who do we most care about supporting, and to what end?
Yeah.
We care most about supporting kids who aren't going to succeed in school, and we want to get them to succeed in school. And one day football, we might not even do football with young people. Who knows, right? As in, I'm open to that possibility, because if every kid in the country suddenly gets into ice hockey, I guess you better switch to ice hockey. Or if suddenly it turns out that doing art-based work with these kids is way more successful than football, and I guess I better learn to paint, right? Like, as in, that honesty to that lens of what is generally going to make a difference is to keep it within it.
Collaboration and networking. How important is it to actually go and meet people and like, can you give any like tips out there to actually meet influential people within your space?
People start with very different constraints and opportunities. We began this when we were 25. We didn't have any money, as in there wasn't any money. So we were like, we're going to, and there's no money in the sector really. Like, these kind of young people don't get a lot of funding to support them, or at least they don't further upstream. They get quite a lot of funding when they end up not in school and whatever. But we're like, cool, we're going to have to get people involved. So from the very start, Pez was really great at like getting out and about social media, telling everyone about FBB. And Jazz was very deliberate about building a youth brand. So people wanted to be associated with it. So yes, go out and about, meet people. But I would say the essence of our success has come from what we've realized is what matters is what we do with young people. And that's the lens I bring to it, right? Like, there's a lot of people who think, I don't know if it's fair, but often founders can think it's all about getting external people on supporting you. And I think often the businesses which grow most quickly, but then fail most quickly, are ones where you gas people up externally and forget. And that's exciting, right? It's a buzz, you meet people. The essence of the business is the work that we do with young people. And so I think we've always, partly because of the relationship to the founding group, Jazz and Pez were passionate about working with young people as well, but it was always a bit of a push-pull between those who were like, get their buzz, their excitement from doing transformational work with young people, and those who got more their buzz and excitement from delivering amazing events, from collaborating with big brands, right? And that's worked for us. And we didn't have a choice. We had to, because if not, I think I would still be doing this part-time, right? And that's the other thing. The other thing I think is really interesting, sorry to freeze you, I know it's helpful, but we started this when we were 25, 26. It's a good time to start a business, right? You kind of got your foot in the door a little bit. You got a few relationships, but we didn't have a load of dependencies. At the time, I had a girlfriend who's not my wife. I didn't have kids. I think often people often think the risk to a business is growing too quickly or like bringing in too much funding. I think the biggest risk to founder-led businesses is that the business doesn't keep pace with your life, which is to say that a lot of people, when they get to being 30, 35, 40, are going to be thinking about having a family and having kids, right? And so suddenly you need to be on an okay salary. Suddenly you need to have time to be with your, I've got a 3-year-old. I'm not going out every evening working anymore. One night a week max. I want to be there for bath time. I want to be there for bedtime, right? We had to make the business keep pace with us. Yeah. Otherwise we would have just left, right? We couldn't have got on, couldn't have got a flat, couldn't have whatever, like been around for our daughter. So I think there's something interesting in that as well, like the time of life that you do it and what is the most appropriate business strategy. for it. We had no contacts. We had to talk. Basically, what did we have? We fucking love working with each other. We had a good balance in terms of internal focus versus external focus. And we had so much time and energy. So that was what we did. We were like, cool, that's the strategy. Really getting to work with young people as our kind of calling card is what we want to be known for. Keep nurturing the relationships between the 3 of us and 4 of us, 5 of us, 8 of us, 10 of us, 20 of us, whatever. And just fucking go for it. Like that was, we used to have a whole Friday night, ride or die, no power, no party. And that worked for the first 7 years, got us to where we are today. But then 2 of that founding group, 2 of the, Pez and Jazz, I think they're open about it, both really struggled with burnout, with mental health, whatever however you want to talk about it. And so that model came to an end at that point. And it's like we can't carry on working in this way. Our life's changed. So there's too many things to say to Bree. Sorry, like lots. But hopefully you get a sense of the energy which is wrapped up in these questions. Even if it's not applicable to different businesses, it's beyond anything else going to require a lot of energy, and love is the greatest source of energy in the universe. So that's always the way I'd be asking people to think through. We have been successful. I think what we've achieved, I'm really proud of, and longer it goes on, I'm like, wow, we built what is today a kind of £3.2 million business doing brilliant work with 3,000 young people. But I'm also aware other people have had better success stories, other people have founded multiple businesses, and I'm also aware of how much it was luck, the things that happened to us along the way. This is a great example of luck in this. When we were really struggling back in 2017, we almost ran out of money. We had to get rid of some of our staff. And around that time, some guy called Bob Roberts, who I've never met, God rest his soul, died in a hospice. He had no family. He was a goalkeeper. He loved football when he was younger. And he donated everything he had to Football Beyond Borders. So we got given £200,000. It's never happened before, never happened since. It was the most random bit of serendipity. At the point in time when we were most worried about money, thinking, is this possible for us to do this in the long term, to get any kind of salary? Literally, we got a fucking letter from a solicitor being like, Bob Roberts has died and he's left you all of his worldly goods. That totals £200,000. It's crazy. I like telling that story and naming the man because in a weird way, he's responsible for, all the stuff that all these young people now get, the benefits, the belonging that they get, comes from this random guy who was a goalkeeper in his youth, who kept that love of football, who died alone, and who said, give it to a football charity. And we were the lead football charity on Google, right? So just good to tell that story. We've worked hard for this, definitely. We have skills to bring to this, but we've also had a lot of luck, and I have no idea. And then me personally, I'm a good strategist. I can think things through. I can work hard, but this business is mainly built on the hard work of other people. Not because I've worked less hard than other people, but because it takes 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 50 people to get something going. And so I'm only a fraction of this. And so I'm always mindful as the kind of last remaining founder, the chief executive, of taking the credit for what was mathematically vastly the work of other people. And I've been proud to be a part of that. So it's just good to name that as well, in case people think I'm too gassed about where we're at.